So this is the interface. When you're trying to make a new document, when making a new document, you have several default ones under mobile, web, and print. You can also make custom saved ones, meaning you can make a template of a custom size that you may need or want. But for now, I want you to go to print, and then under print, change points, which is a unit of measure, primarily used for newspapers. Change points to inches. And then change it to be 11 by 11, 11 width and 11 height. Now then in Illustrator, you have what's called artboards. Well, now in CC 2020, Photoshop also has artboards, but originally Illustrator was the only one that had artboards. Artboards allows you to have multiple, essentially canvases on one document. Meaning, for example, if you're doing a logo design and you're doing a business card stationery set, you don't have to have the letterhead and business card and logo on a separate page, on a separate document. You can all have it contained in one document, all on the same page in different artboards. So for now, I want you to make 4 artboards. And then now under advanced options, color mode, CMYK, because normally you would be printing these, but in this case we're not. So, but still make the color mode CMYK, and PPI, pixels per inch, or DPI in Photoshop. You want to make sure it's at the highest resolution, which is 300. Now, if we were doing something for websites, 72 PPI is the standard. But since we're doing this for print, save it at 300. Under more settings, you have a few other options here, but we don't necessarily have to deal with that for now, but you can give this a title. So call this Tut 1, meaning tutorial 1, and press create. So once you press create, you'll see that you have your artboards, 4 artboards on one page. All right, so this is the interface. You can customize it, you can change it to your liking. So for example, by default, the toolbars on the left-hand side, and then you have your main panels on the right-hand side. Under window, you have all of these windows here: actions, align, artboards, attributes, color mode. All of these can be separate tear-off sheets here. But for the sake of being consistent with what you may have, go to workspace. Now this is different workspaces based upon presets. So for now, if Essentials Classic is checked already, hit Reset Essentials Classic to get it back to default. All right, so now looking at the options here, you have the color mode or color panels, color guide, swatches, brushes, symbols, strokes, gradient, transparency, appearances. And the most important thing here is going to be your layers panel, much like it will be in Photoshop, and then your properties. It's always good to keep your properties panel open because this changes based upon the tool you're clicked on. Meaning if you're on the type tool, it's going to shift over to text options. If you're on the shape tool, it's going to shift over to different shape options and so forth. So make sure that no matter what, you generally have your properties panel always open, because this is what you're going to primarily be utilizing to edit and tweak the tools on the left-hand side. So in Illustrator, it's primarily meant to make vector graphics, meaning logos, poster designs, anything dealing with a brand, packaging also, anything dealing with a brand or logos needs to be done in Illustrator. You never want to design a logo in Photoshop because of the scaling issue. Like I said, vectors never get pixelated because they're not based off of pixels. So if you were designing a logo in Photoshop and you made it, say, 4 by 6, but then you needed to blow it up to fit on the side of a building or on the side of a car or even on a t-shirt. If you try to blow it up from 4x6 to say 11x17 or 10 feet by 10 feet, it's going to look extremely pixelated. So that's why you always design it in Illustrator, because no matter what size it is, it will never look pixelated. It will always remain its same pixel density. Any questions about that? Nope, cool. So now I'm big on keyboard shortcuts because they ultimately save time. But for now, I am going to say the keyboard shortcut, but also I am going to click on the tool. So clicking on the rectangle tool, the keyboard shortcut is M. So also keyboard shortcut to zoom in, zoom out is Control plus or Command plus for Macs. To pan around the document, meaning once you're zoomed in order to pan around it, you can hold the space bar and the icon will turn into a little glove that will allow you to pan around the document without having to use the scroll bar on your mouse or on your trackpad. So Control plus, Control minus, zoom in, zoom out. Space bar is for the pan tool. And so for now, M is the rectangle tool. So drag out a rectangle. And now, as you can see on the properties panel, it's at stroke 1 and fill is white. So if you want to change that, you can click on the fill and you can change the color of the fill as well as the color of the stroke. So right now the stroke is at 1 point, meaning it's a very thin line. If you wanted a larger stroke, you can simply increase it to say 6. So the stroke is much thicker, and you can simply click on the color swatch next to the word stroke to change the color as well. So L is the keyboard shortcut for the ellipse tool or circle tool. Now, when you drag this tool out, if you do not hold shift, you can get a ellipse. If you want a perfect circle or anything perfectly symmetrical, you would hold shift as you drag it out to make a perfect circle, as well as for the rectangle. Hold shift, you make a perfect square. So I'm going to pan over to my second panel, and we're going to actually make something out of these basic shapes. So in order to reset it, meaning take it back to black and white, if you look on your left-hand toolbar, at the very top, you should see the selection tool. Keyboard shortcut is V. Beneath that is the direct select tool or white arrow tool, which is a direct select. Keyboard shortcut is A. But jumping all the way down to the bottom of the toolbar here, you can see this little black and white. Does everybody see the black and white squares? When you click on that, that will allow you to reset your color swatches back to black and white. So click on those two icons to reset your colors back to black and white. And then hit the M for the rectangle tool and draw out a rectangle. And then hit the L and draw out an ellipse the exact width of the rectangle. But if you're having trouble with this, so something like this, go to View and then turn on Smart Guides or Control U. This is what allows you to kind of see where you are in terms of the measurements, because it measures the distance and proximity and center and all those different anchor points or different intersecting points on other objects that are on the page. So once you have this, click on the ellipse tool, the ellipse on the document. Hold down the Alt. When you press Alt and you click and drag on an object and let go of the mouse before you let go the Alt button, it will clone or copy whatever you clicked on. So hold on Alt, click and drag, and it copies the exact shape. The long way of doing this is doing Command-C, copy, Command-V, paste. But for a quick drag, hit Alt and drag on the shape and copy it. So you should have 3 shapes on your page, 2 ellipses, 1 rectangle. Click on the bottom ellipse and put it intersected at the bottom. So you see how it says intersecting or intersect? That means the perfect center of the ellipse is at the bottom of the rectangle. So it should look something like this. So once you do that, I want you to hold Shift, and Shift will allow you to click on multiple shapes. So I'm gonna hold Shift, click on the rectangle, continuing to hold Shift, click on the ellipse at the bottom. Now, as you can see, once we selected 2 objects, the properties panel shifted to a different configuration. It still gives us the fill and stroke and opacity, but now it gives us the alignment, and it gives us the Pathfinder panel. Pathfinder panel would allow us to combine these 2 shapes into one. So I'm going to click on the first one where it says Unite, or the 2 squares that look like they're merged together. Click on those, and now this ellipse and rectangle are now one shape. So then I'm going to take my top ellipse and intersect it with the top of this one to make a cylinder. I guess my scale is not working today. Oh well. All right, so copy it over. So you should have 2, 1 small, 1 big cylinders on your screen, yes? All right, so click on the top ellipse, or the top, this one, click on it. And now in this case, press Control-C, which is copy, and then Control-F, paste in place. This means we pasted, we copied and then pasted it exactly in the same place. So in this case, hit S. S is the keyboard shortcut for scale. And now what you want to do is you want to click on the corner of the circle. And yes, circles do have corners. You want to click on any place along the path. Do not click on the anchors, because the anchors will cause it to scale in proportionally like this. When you click on one of the paths, we want it to scale in like this. We'll do that again. So click on the top ellipse, Control-C, Control-F, copy, paste, and place. Hit S on the keyboard, click on one of the paths, not the anchors, because this is how the anchors will respond. Click on the path and scale it inward, like so. So now we're going to do this. I want you to Alt and copy this and drag this to the side. And then scale this down and put it up top. So now you should have 3 objects on the page. Because now for this one, we're going to start adding color to this. So in order to add color, you want to utilize your swatch panel, or you can utilize your fill panel. So click on the main tube, which is this one. Double click on fill. And now this gives you different color swatch options. So I'm going to make this off-white, slightly darker at the, actually no, slightly darker in the bottom, lighter on the top, and then make this brown. All right, so now once you have that done, select all shapes by clicking and dragging over them, or hold shift and click all 3 shapes. And in this case, you want to turn your 1-point stroke into 0 because you no longer want to stroke. Because it looks more realistic that way. All right, so now looking at this, I'm going to scale this down slightly. And then I'm going to Alt and copy it over to the left. So you should have 2. Now this is when we cover the white arrow tool or the direct select tool. Now the direct select tool allows you to manipulate certain points. So for example, if I were to make a rectangle, and when I click on the points, I can scale them with the black arrow tool. I can scale it up and down, top to bottom. But the direct select tool allows me to click on the individual points and manipulate the individual points versus moving the whole shape. So that's the main difference. The direct select tool allows you to manipulate the points on a shape, and the selection tool or move tool allows you to scale the whole shape. Make sense? So that's the major difference. But as it relates to this shape here, we're going to manipulate these 3 bottom points only. So I'm going to click off and click over and marquee over the bottom 3 points, or hold shift and select the 3 points. And then when I pull it down directly, it just extends it. It extends the body of the now paper towel roll versus TP. But it doesn't scale it. If I were to do this with the direct select tool, if I were to do this with the selection tool and try to scale it down or stretch it down, it only allows me to, it will only stretch it out versus actually scale it, making it scale downward. So this allows me to pull and maneuver it any way I want to make it double the height, or it's more than double. So then now you have 2 separate objects from essentially the same shape. All right, so next we're going to cover the infamous pen tool. It is the bane of many people's existence. It does not go away, especially in other programs. The pen tool is in just about all the Adobe software. So instead of running from it, embrace it, because it will save you a lot of time, especially when you get over to Photoshop. So the pen tool, it allows you to make points and lines. So first, you click 1 to make 1 point, and then you click to make another point. So now it makes it, so when you have 2 points, it makes a line. But once you add that 3rd point, it then turns into a shape. So for example, you can make different shapes with this. Now that's if you want to go straight, but if you want to curve, meaning click 1 point and you click and hold the mouse to get an angle. If you wanted to make a curved shape of some kind. So click once, always click once to start the point. Click again to make a 2nd line. 3rd, and then now this looks like a shape, but it's not a closed shape. You always, with the pen tool, you always have to end where you started. So click on the point you started with to close it. So as it relates to this, for example, we're going to do a tear off sheet. So I'm going to click at the top to anchor, and then I'm going to kind of angle it out. Angle it slightly. And then go straight back up. So now we have a tear sheet, meaning, remember, take off the stroke. And then technically we can just Alt and copy this one. And then we can just make it smaller. What is it? Scale. Scale it down and make it smaller to fit on the TP roll. And you can, make it wider if you want. Any questions about that? No? Pretty straightforward? Cool. All right, so lastly, we're going to go over a hint of color grading. So right now, these are all flat colors, right? Let's make this smaller. So let's make this. Actually, I'll make this. So I'm going to drag, Alt, and copy the tile roll. Scale it back up. Oh, too big. Still too big. So now, instead of it being flat color, so for example, I'm going to show the difference. Because what you have here, you have the baseline, the outline, and then solid color. Now, when you click on the main body, which is this large section here. Now, on your toolbar panel on the right-hand side, you have, or you should see the gradient tool or gradient next to stroke. Does everybody see that? Now, if you've ever taken a drawing class, drawing 1, basic drawing, you know the illusion of curves or curvature is how light travels across the surface. Gradient allows us to, in Illustrator, give the illusion of light going across the surface via a gradient map or a gradient. So for example, in this case, since it's white, I'm going to click on my gradient toolbar. Now by default, it's going from black to white. So these two circles here on the gradient bar, if you were to drag white around, it'll be more white. If you drag black, it'll be more black. But in the center, it's that transition between white and black that gives you that gray. So in this case, what you want to do is, the rule of thumb for a gradient tool is you always want to use a lighter hue of the same color. So you don't want to go from you don't want to go from red to green, because in the center of that transition is going to be some muddy color. You want to go from a lighter red to a darker red, a lighter white to a darker white to give the illusion of light going across the surface. Right? Because if you have an object and it's cast in shadow or the shady side, it's still the same color, just a darker color. So in this instance, I'm going to use, so I'm going to change this black. Double click on this, and I'm going to use a lighter hue or a gray, which is really white. A shaded white is gray. So that on the left-hand side, so the light's coming from the left-hand side, obviously, because on this side it's the lighter, and it gets darker gradually as you go across to the crease, right? And then the same thing for this one. I'm going to hit the gradient. Now this time I'm going to reverse it. I'm going to put the darker side. I'm going to grab the circle and reverse where the white and gray is. So it's going to be going from gray to white on this side. So you see the difference? How it looks like it's a shadow here versus on here, it's flat. Same thing for the top. I'm going to give the illusion of light going across the surface. So I'm going to go from white to gray at the top with a little more white because it's at the top, it's on the top plane, like so. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the tube on the inside. I'm going to click on the white, but then I'm going to click on my swatch panel, click on a dark brown and drag it down and put it directly over top of the gray circle. And then I'm gonna grab a lighter brown and do the same thing for the white circle. Click and drag it over the white. So even the inside of it is a gradient.